A director's cut edition of Ghost of Tsushima was released a year after the original version in the summer of 2020. The game was incredibly well received at the time, and when a game is that successful, fans eventually start to wonder when they will learn about a sequel. There hasn't been any official word, but there are some early indications that a Ghost of Tsushima sequel is unavoidable. Though it certainly seems to be a focus that Sony indulges in, not every new IP needs to have franchise potential to be enjoyed. Additionally, it appears that Sony is more interested in producing live-action remakes of its PlayStation games than anything else, including Uncharted, The Last of Us, God of War, Horizon, Twisted Metal, and Gran Turismo. Despite the fact that Ghost of Tsushima will have a movie adaptation, there are still other factors that make the game likely to have sequel and franchise potential. A movie adaptation of Ghost of Tsushima is currently in development. With the release of a live-action film, Ghost of Tsushima has the exceptional chance to increase its popularity and anticipation, and its exposure would serve to pique interest in future game installments among gamers. If for no other reason than to capitalize on how much money the franchise has already made, it would be absurd to make a movie adaptation of the game without any plans to create a prequel or sequel. A Ghost of Tsushima movie's performance may also have an impact on how much emphasis Sony places on Sucker Punch's samurai IP moving forward. But even though the idea for a sequel was scrapped, a live-action adaptation of Days Gone is still in the works, suggesting that Sony is trying to squeeze every last penny out of its IPs. It's best if PlayStation first-party games and their live-action adaptations don't interfere with one another, but it would be surprising if a game like Ghost of Tsushima didn't get a sequel while a movie was in the works. Job listings and sales by Sucker Punch could indicate a Ghost of Tsushima sequel. Sucker Punch was hiring for someone with knowledge of Ghost of Tsushima in particular, let alone the history of feudal Japan, as was seen in several job postings for the company in recent years. It is possible that this mention is just meant to weed out anyone who is not familiar with Sucker Punch's most recent work. But given that one of the posts specifically mentions Ghost of Tsushima, it would be surprising if this is the case. This implies that it will be directly impacted by or connected to Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker Punch and Sony should continue the action if the IP is to have any franchise potential. As of last summer, 2 years after its release, Ghost of Tsushima had also amassed sales of nearly 10 million copies. Because of their built-in budgets and marketing efforts, Sony's first-party games typically do well in the market, but Days Gone would come up again as an example of how such sales figures are occasionally insufficient to sustain a franchise financially. Despite this, Days Gone was still cancelled despite having sold more copies in less time than Ghost of Tsushima. Sony may have more faith in Ghost of Tsushima because of its obvious appeal, but regardless, it is fairly obvious that more Ghost of Tsushima content from Sucker Punch should be anticipated in the future. Ghost of Tsushima is a PS4 and PS5 game. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and support my channel.